Hello students, welcome to IAS by Heart. Welcome to the 15th session of the Prelims Heat series. I hope you have all applied for the UPSC Prelims 2021 and are dedicatedly preparing for the same. So this initiative is to help you in your prelims preparation. So far we have completed 14 sessions and covered 140 questions. So this will be your 15th session. So without any further delay, let's jump into the first question. The first question is on polity, and it is about the adoption law in India. Which of the following law regulates and also sought to create a universally accessible adoption law for India? Okay, these are our four options. I'll give you 5 seconds to give me an answer. Just go through the options and give me an answer in the comment box below. The answer to this question is option C. Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Children Act 2015. Juvenile Justice Act, it creates a body called Central Adoption Resource Authority, which will take care of all the adoption related matters in India. So if you look at option D, Central Adoption Resource Authority Act, an act in that name has not been passed. Only under Juvenile Justice Act, we have created this CARA authority. Okay, that's what you have to know. Let's see more about this in the coming slide. So child protection in India is regulated under Juvenile Justice Act. So this will help the juveniles who are in conflict with law. So this also talks about care of such juveniles. The act also sought to create a universally accessible adoption law for India, overtaking Hindu Adoptions and Maintenance Act and Guardians and Wards Act, though not replacing them. You see, there was no uniformity. For example, Hindus, Buddhists, Jains and Sikhs, they had a different adoption and maintenance law. And for Muslims alone, we had Guardians and Wards Act. So to create a uniform system, CARA under Juvenile Justice Act was formed. Okay, to streamline these adoption procedures, Central Adoption Resource Authority has been given the status of statutory body under this act. Okay, and it has streamlined the process for both in-country and inter-country adoption. There is no such act as Central Adoption Resource Authority Act. CARA has been given the status of a statutory body under Juvenile Justice Act. That is what you have to note here. And this was recently in news because there was a plea in the Delhi High Court to simplify the child adoption process. Okay, and this long procedures under CARA is giving rise to grey market. You have to note we are already not a signatory of the Hague Code of Child Adoption. Okay, because India has some hesitations in joining the Hague Code of Child Adoption. Okay, so you have to note India is not a signatory. Let's move on to the next question. So moderation in oil prices in global markets is a result of, we have three statements: global oil production cuts, increase in supply, global monetary and liquidity environment. So they are talking about moderation. Moderation means the price reduction. In this context, it means reduction in oil prices in global markets is a result of. We have four options here. I'll give you 5 seconds to give me an answer. Okay, first of all, let's see the first option given here. Global oil production cuts. Okay, suppose if globally production is brought down, that means supply is brought down, what will happen to the price? The price will increase. This is the basic law of demand and supply. So first option will not come because it is totally antithetical to what the question is about. Okay, so if you remove the first option, the answer to this question is D, 2 and 3 only. Because increase in supply and global monetary and liquidity and environment, both of them will affect the oil prices. Okay. In the last week, there were a lot of negotiations on cutting oil production across the OPEC and OPEC plus countries and how India opposed. So there was a lot of news and coverage given to this area. You can see here that India urges OPEC to ease output cuts to rein in oil prices because oil prices were rising like anything post the normalization that followed the COVID-19 pandemic, and the OPEC countries have decided to cut production to control the prices. And India requested them to not do so, but the OPEC had ignored India's call. Saudi asks New Delhi to use cheap oil it bought last year. Okay, So that is what the news is about, and that is what you have to know. If the global oil production comes down, the price will go up. Okay, let's move on to the next question. And here we have the first statement. The state government in India have no powers to grant refugee status to any foreigner. Okay. Second statement says India is a signatory to the United Nations Refugee Convention of 1951 and its 1967 protocol. Okay, I'll give you 5 seconds to give me an answer. First of all, you have to know whether giving the refugee status, any of the states, do they have that power? The answer is no. So this statement is correct. State governments have no powers giving, regarding the refugee status. Okay. And the second statement, India is a signatory to the United Nations Refugee Convention of 1951. That is also wrong. India is not a signatory, and India has made its stand clear that it won't sign the 1951 convention or its 1967 protocol. So the answer to this question will be one only. Okay, let's see more about the convention in the coming slides. So this is the refugee convention. It is a multilateral treaty which defines who is a refugee, and it also sets out the right of individuals who are granted asylum and the responsibilities of the nation that grants asylum. Okay, all of them are divided in this convention, and it also grants the rights to people who are fleeing persecution. Those people should not be returned to the country where they face persecution. That is also an important provision. India is not a member. This is what you have to note here. And the convention also sets out which people do not qualify as refugees. Certain people do not qualify as refugees. People who are war criminals, etc. And the convention also talks about visa-free travel access for holders of travel documents issued under the convention. So this convention builds on the Article 14 of Human Rights Declarations of UN. But India officially has not signed this because it mentions that the borders in South Asian region are really porous, and any instability in the region might push people across the boundaries, which will become a huge stress for the nations who will host those refugee population. This will affect the very minimum resources that are already available for the existing population. That is the official stance of Indian government as far as this convention is concerned. Let's see about the protocol as well. This protocol, actually, the convention of 1951 was Eurocentric. So that Eurocentrism was removed by the 1967 protocol. It includes refugees from all countries, as opposed to the 1951 convention, which included only refugees from Europe. India is neither a party to this protocol. So why won't India sign this convention? Because it is mainly security related concerns. Anything can happen. For example, recently in Myanmar, the democratic government was overthrown and military rule was reinstated. So in such a situation, people from Myanmar will flee the country and they will come to India, and India shares a major long boundary with Myanmar. So this might upset the demographic balance in South Asia. So those kind of strains on local infrastructure would become a huge burden for a developing country like India. So that's why India doesn't want to be associated with this convention. And there is also another argument which states India already does its duty, and it doesn't even take money from UN to look after its refugees. So why we have to sign a piece of paper? So why this question was asked? This question was asked because the center recently notified the states in the northeastern states, the governments of the northeastern states, to stop the illegal influx from Myanmar, especially after the military coup. Okay. So let's move on to the next question. This question is with regard to digital payment index. The first statement says it is a composite index to capture the extent of digitization of payments across the country. It will be published by Niti Aayog on a semi-annual basis from March 2021. So we have two statements. I'll give you 5 seconds to give me an answer. Digital Payments Index. Okay. This index is released by RBI, not Niti Aayog. Okay, so that's why statement 2 is wrong, and the answer to this question becomes 1 only. Let's see more about this index. So Reserve Bank of India has constructed a composite digital payment index. Okay, this is to capture the digitization of payments, the extent of digitization of payments in the country. Okay, it will consider March 2018 as the base period, and how incrementally we have grown will be noted by this index. Okay, this will be published on a semi-annual basis from March 2021, and it has 5 broad parameters: payment enablers, payment infrastructure, from demand side factors and supply side factors, payment performance, and consumer centricity. All of this are given distributed weightage. Okay, they together constitute the digital payment index. Okay, the first edition of the index will be released from March 21. So we'll see who have done well and who have not done well. Okay, that's all we have here on digital payments index. Let's move on to the next question. The next question we have here is from geography on availability of natural resources, distribution of natural resources. First statement says India has the world's fifth largest reserves of coal, yet it is the world's second largest importer. Okay, and India's coal reserves are primarily of lignite and anthracite types. These are the two statements. I'll give you 5 seconds to give me an answer. Okay, in India, there is a high demand for coal. So even though we have large reserves of coal, we import a lot more. The first statement is correct. India has fifth largest reserves, but yet it is the second largest importer. And coming to the second statement, the Indian coal reserves are primarily of lignite and anthracite types. So this is wrong. We do not have much anthracite reserves. What we have is lignite and bituminous. Okay. So coal is of 4 types: anthracite, bituminous, lignite, and peat. Peat is pretty useless. It has very high ash content. So the best quality of coal is anthracite. Just in the alphabetical order, if you can remember, A, B, L, P. This A is of highest quality. Next to A, we have bituminous, and next to bituminous, we have lignite, and we have peat at the last. Okay. Indian coal reserves are mainly bituminous and lignite. Anthracite, there are very few reserves in Jammu and Kashmir, but we are not mining them. Okay. So the second option is wrong. The answer to this question is A1 only. Let's see about coal's distribution in India. India has, like we said, India has the world's fifth largest reserves of coal, yet it is the second largest importer. Currently, 80% of coal production comes from Coal India Limited. And other than that, we have some other PSUs, state PSUs in association with center, which also mines coal. Okay, and the coal reserves are located mainly in the states of Deccan Plateau. This place is rich in coal reserves. And Indian coal reserves are mainly of lignite and bituminous. We saw that. And Indian coal has lower calorific value and high ash content. And it also has lower sulfur. So better sulfur means better calorific value. That's all you have to note here. Let's move on to the next question. The next question is on science and tech. It's about the different commercial arms of ISRO. New Space India Limited, NSIL, will handle ISRO's commercial deals for satellites and launch vehicles with foreign customers. Antrix, the other commercial arm, it will deal with capacity building of local industry for space manufacturing. Okay, you have to understand what function does both the arms do. I'll give you 5 seconds to give me an answer. You can give it in the comment box below. The answer to this question is neither one nor two, because the options are interchanged here. Antrix deals with foreign customers, whereas NSIL will handle the capacity building of local industry. Okay, let's see what New Space India Limited is about. It was established very recently after announcing in the budget 2019, and it aims to use the R&D carried out by ISRO for commercial purposes by engaging Indian industry partners. That is the reason why it was created. So you have to understand the purpose behind the creation of this body. And the functions include satellite technology transfer to industry, manufacturing of small satellite launch vehicles, and production of polar satellite launch vehicles through Indian industry. And it comes under the administrative control of Department of Space, and this is directly under Prime Minister's office. Okay, and it was incorporated as a central public sector enterprise. And Antrix is also a PSU under Department of Space, which acts as the commercial arm of ISRO. NSIL differs from Antrix in the following way. Antrix will handle ISRO's commercial deals with foreign customers, whereas NSIL will deal with capacity building of local industry. Okay, that's what you have to know. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, this question is from Modern India, and this is about a famous personality. From these given statements, you have to identify the person who is being talked about here. First statement says he was the president of the Indian National Congress when India attained independence. And he was the first to contact Gandhiji after the later returned from South Africa. Okay, and then he founded the Kisan Mazdoor Praja Party. You have 5 seconds. The answer to this question is Acharya J.B. Kripalani. Let's see more about him in the coming slides. So Jeevitram Bhagwan Das Kripalani, who was popularly known as Acharya Kripalani, was famous for his contribution both in pre and post-independence era. And he was also the president of INC when India got independence. And he is a true follower of Gandhiji. And he was also a close aide of Jawaharlal Nehru. Okay. And he worked in Gandhi ashrams in Gujarat, Maharashtra, Bihar, UP, etc. And he was the first person to contact Gandhiji, and after he returned from South Africa. He, in a sense, inspired Gandhiji to take up the cause of Indian national movement. And Kripalani left the Congress because of some misunderstandings, and he formed the Kisan Mazdoor Praja Party, and which later on merged with the Socialist Party of India. This was founded by Acharya Narendra Dev and Jayaprakash Narayan. Okay, these two parties merged to form the Praja Socialist Party. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So this question is from Art and Culture, and here also we have 3 different features, and they are asking the above features correspond to which of the following temple complex. So the first one is harmonious blend of Dravida style temples and Nagara style temples. Also hosts a Jain temple, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Okay. We have 4 options here. The Lingaraja temple complex is in Odisha. Temples at Pattadakal in Karnataka. Bodhi, we know it is in Gaya, Bihar. And Dilwara temples in Rajasthan. So they are asking about these features. They are looking for these features. So which of the following temples have these features? I'll give you 5 seconds. The answer to this question is temples at Pattadakal. Pattadakal group of temples have these features. So this is the group of temples at Pattadakal, and it is situated in the southern state of Karnataka, and it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It is famous for its harmonious blend of architectural forms of both North India and South India. Totally, there are 10 temples. 4 are in Dravida style and 4 are in Nagara style. And you can see clearly here this type of Gopura of Nagara style and a Dravida style Vimanas here. So both of them exist side by side. That is a unique feature of this temples. You can see here also. The Pattadakal was the capital of the Chalukya dynasty. They created these temples and it was later worked upon by Rashtrakutas as well. So the Virupaksha temple built by Queen Lok Mahadevi in the southern Dravida style is the largest in the enclosure. And the Virupaksha temple is also served as a model for Rashtrakuta ruler to carve out great Kailasha at Ellora. So let's see, the oldest temple was the Sangameshwara temple. It was built by Vijayaditya Satyasraya. Okay, he was also a Chalukyan ruler. And then we have Jambulinga temple and Mallikarjuna, Chandrasekhara, and Kadaisi Deshwara temple. We also have a Jain Narayana temple built by Rashtrakutas in the 19th century. It is the only Jain temple in the complex. Only Jain temple in the complex. That's all you have to know here. Let's move on to the next question on government schemes. Here they have asked who among the following is not eligible for income support under PM Kisan scheme. We know that PM Kisan scheme is an additional income support where the farmers are given 6,000 annually in 3 equal installments. Here they are asking who of the following will not cannot become or cannot receive this income support. We have 5 options here: institutional landholders, constitutional post holders, retired or serving government employees, pensioner with greater than 10,000 monthly pensions, professionals like doctors, lawyers, etc. Okay, I'll give you 5 seconds. So the answer to this question is all of the above. All of the above mentioned group of people are not eligible for income support under PM Kisan. Okay, you have to note the exceptions because a lot of these people are included, and there was a scam that recently happened in Tamil Nadu. That's why people who are exempted becomes important. PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, and it is a central sector scheme. Central sector scheme, 100% funding is from the government of India, and we know that income support of 6,000 is provided in 3 equal installments every 4 months, and it is implemented in the direct benefit transfer mode. And according to this, a farmer's family is defined as a family comprising of husband, wife, and minor children. Okay, this is the technical definition given to a farmer's family under this initiative, and there are around 11 crore beneficiaries registered under this scheme. So the responsibility of identification, you have to note, the responsibility of identification rests with state or union governments. The benefit shall be paid only to those farmers' families whose names are entered into the land records. Okay, they have to have proper land records, except for forest dwellers, northeastern states, and Jharkhand, which has separate provisions for land records. Okay, the scheme excludes these people, the ones we saw in the question: institutional landholders, constitutional post holders. Those are nothing but the ministers, MLAs, MPs, state legislature, mayors, etc. And also retired or serving government employees also not eligible. Pensioner with greater than 10,000 monthly pensions, and people paying service tax. The people paying service tax are the ones who are doctors, lawyers, etc. So those people are also not eligible under PM Kisan. Just have a look at the people who are exempted. Okay, let's move on to the next question. The final question for today's session is on Project Echo. So it was began in 2003 as a healthcare initiative by World Health Organization, and it is a low cost way out for growing the size of health workers in underserved communities. I'll give you 5 seconds to answer this question. Give your answers in the comment box below. The answer to this question is option 2, because this is a healthcare initiative, but it was not started by WHO. It was started by a single doctor. One person started this whole initiative. His name is Dr. Sanjeev Arora. Dr. Sanjeev Arora. Let's see more about this in the coming slide. The project ECHO. ECHO means Extension for Community Health Outcomes. It was began as a healthcare initiative by scientist Dr. Sanjeev Arora, a liver disease specialist in US. Okay, a lot of people in US were affected by a liver disease. Okay, but Dr. Sanjeev Arora was really upset about the lack of qualified persons who could treat these liver disease. Okay, so he started this initiative, and under this initiative, he set up virtual clinics that uses teleconferencing to bridge the gap in healthcare resources. Here, expert specialists, they will teach a group of learners who will then treat the patients. This is very different from how telemedicine works. Telemedicine is a qualified doctor directly reaching out to a patient. That is telemedicine, but in ECHO, the expert teams will teach a group of aspiring doctors and nurses, and who will in turn treat the patients. So you can see how the people who can benefit are much more under this initiative. Okay, they don't directly, ECHO does not provide a care directly to the patients. Instead, they equip healthcare clinicians, doctors and nurses and other health workers in remote areas with knowledge, so that they can manage complex cases. Okay, and India also has many eco clinics. India is a key beneficiary of this project. The first key eco clinic was began in 2008, and it was set up as a partnership between NACO and Maulana Azad Medical College, and this was to manage HIV/AIDS. Even though it was Project ECHO was started to address liver disease, today it tackles addiction and substance abuse disorders, mental health, tuberculosis, hepatitis C, liver diseases, cancer screening, prevention, and HIV and AIDS as well. You can see how many eco clinics are there in India in this map. So that's all we have here for today. Let's have a quick recap of what we saw today. The first question was on Central Adoption Resource Authority. It comes under Juvenile Justice Act. It is a statutory body which regulates adoption inter-country and intra-country. The second question is about oil prices and how global production cuts affects the oil prices. And then we have a UN Refugee Convention of 1951. India is not a party either to this convention or the 1967 protocol. And we also elaborately saw the India's stance on these issues. And then we saw Digital Payments Index released by RBI. Then we saw about the coal resources in India. India has the 5th largest reserves, but it is the 2nd largest importer. And Indian coal is primarily lignite and bituminous, which are of substandard quality. And commercial arms of ISRO, Antrix and New Space India Limited. Both of them are commercial arms. Antrix deals with foreign associations, whereas NSIL deals with domestic partnerships. And then we saw about JB Kripalani, a freedom fighter who contributed to India's politics, both pre and post independence. And he was also the founder of Kisan Mazdoor Praja Party, which was later merged with Congress Socialist Party. And then we saw about temples of Pattadakkal, a UNESCO World Heritage Site from Karnataka. It has both Dravida and Nagara style temples. And then we have PM Kisan. We saw who are not the beneficiaries of PM Kisan, who cannot become the beneficiaries. And we also saw about Project ECHO by Dr. Sanjeev Arora. So that's all we saw in this session. I want you all to go through this questions once again and get familiarized with the topic. If you have any questions, just give me in the comments box below. If you don't have any questions, let's wrap up this session. Thank you. Stay tuned for upcoming sessions. This will be highly beneficial to you. Until today, we have covered 150 questions. Okay. Go through them once more again. Revise them, revisit them, review them, and let me know if you have any doubts in this session. Okay, that's all we have here. Thank you.